Welcome to the Connecting with Coincidence radio show with Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, bringing together the world's synchronicity experts to help you use meaningful coincidences to develop spiritually, psychologically, and practically. For more information, put Connecting with Coincidence into your web browser to find the book, website, Psychology Today blog, YouTube channel, and Facebook page. And now, here is the host of the Connecting with Coincidence radio show, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. Yes, I am your host, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, and I am a psychiatrist. Carl Jung introduced the Western world to synchronicity. The rock band The Police popularized the idea in their album Synchronicity, and they were followed by numerous books, articles, movies, and videos. But why this growing interest? Weird coincidences are messages to us earthlings about the true nature of reality, messages we can try to decode. They tell us that our minds are interconnected and are part of a greater mind that I call the psychosphere, that each of us has powers and abilities waiting to be linked with one another to create more beautiful and loving lives for each and all of us. But wait, don't believe me just because I say so. Look at the meaningful coincidences happening in your life. On your own, find their helpful advice. Direct experience is the key. They're evidence for deep connections with those you love and others. Listen to the synchronicity experts who graciously come to speak with me. Look at my Psychology Today blog and my book, Connecting with Coincidence. Look at my website to see how sensitive to coincidences you are. Take the Weird Coincidence Survey. Learn to decode your synchronicity messages by accessing your own deep wisdom, and let coincidences help you discover your own latent abilities. Synchronicity spoken here. Our guests today are Eben Alexander and Karen Newell. Eben Alexander, a physician and teacher at Harvard Medical School and elsewhere, a renowned neurosurgeon, thought he knew how the brain worked, how the mind worked, and how consciousness worked. A transcendental near-death experience during a week-long coma from an inexplicable brain infection changed all of that completely. Since his 2008 NDE, he has been reconciling his rich spiritual experience with the contemporary physics and cosmology. His conclusion: we are conscious in spite of our brain. Dr. Alexander has been a guest on the Dr. Oz, Oprah, and many other media programs. His most recent book, co-authored with Karen Newell, is Living in a Mindful Universe. His earlier books, Proof of Heaven and A Map of Heaven, have collectively spent more than 2 years on top of the New York Times and international bestseller lists. Karen Newell, co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, is an innovator in the emerging field of brainwave entrainment audio meditation. She empowers others in their journeys of self-discovery using sacred acoustic recordings. She teaches how to connect to inner guidance, achieve inspiration, improve wellness, and develop intuition. In her search for answers to fundamental questions, it became clear to her that direct experience is crucial to full understanding. Direct experience. She developed expertise in living through daily connection with the universal consciousness, using heart awareness as a central element. And at international workshops, Karen demonstrates key practices of consciousness exploration, which include heart awareness, intention, maintaining neutrality, emotional management, and cultivating internal knowing. Welcome to the show, Karen and Eben. It's a pleasure to have you with me.
Well, Bernie, thanks so much for having us. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it's great to be doing this again.
Yeah.
So you sent me a coincidence yesterday around 3 p.m. And please tell us about that emerging from the attic coincidence of yours.
Okay, well, this is just one synchronicity that happened to me years ago, but it absolutely stunned me into recognizing that there's something bigger going on here. It turns out that I was clearing out my attic on a weekend day off. It was in late spring. It was a beautiful kind of sunny day, but mainly partly cloudy with a lot of big, fluffy cumulus clouds in the sky. Anyway, I was upstairs in the attic clearing things, and all of a sudden this thought entered my mind that I had to find this model I had of a B-2 bomber. It was a large radio-controlled B-2 that had a 48-inch wingspan that I had built to play with my sons with. And I had not seen it in about 2 years. And why that thought entered my mind at that moment, I really don't know. But the thought was very strong. Oh, we got to find this bomber. I was looking around the attic at various places I thought it would be. And then I thought, no, maybe it's down the garage. I ran downstairs out to our garage. This is when we were living in Needham, Massachusetts. Looked around the garage, quickly did not see the bomber anywhere, and then just kind of scratching my head, I ran out the garage door into our driveway. And on a whim, I just looked up at the sky. And I saw something in the sky that I've never seen before or since in the sky. And that was a B-2 bomber. It was actually very low. It was probably no more than 3,000 feet up. And it was in a banking turn between clouds. And I was absolutely shocked to be looking up and seeing, the real thing of that model that I'd been so intensely looking for the last 10 minutes. And it was just an absolute shocker to me. Of course, my interest was greatly piqued, and the next day in reading the Boston Globe, I did come to realize that bomber had been there to do a flyover at Fenway Ballpark for a Red Sox baseball game. So that explained why the bomber was there. But the timing of it, especially with my awareness of the model and looking for it and the intensity, and then running out the driveway and looking up and seeing that in the one little instant it was between clouds, but it was absolutely without fail a B-2 bomber. I knew that completely. And so anyway, that was a coincidence or synchronicity that has always kind of stricken me, because it tells me there's much more to this universe than I would have thought in terms of causality.
When I hear the story, it starts with you're having the impulse to go look for the B-2 in your attic, and it becomes in side terms, a precognitive experience without knowing it. You were following the impulse, so somehow you picked up that B-2 bomber was in the area. And then somehow you also timed it right, so the bomber came out of the clouds, and there you were being able to see it. So we're talking about capacities that you had even at that time before your NDE, that all of us have, and that our listeners have also, to be able to notice these things, and we'll get to what they mean. But when I read your email from about what this coincidence that you just described yesterday, I got chills myself, because while you may have thought of this, or the email came to me around 3 p.m. yesterday, about 11:30 yesterday, I was reading a book called Synchronicity as a Mystical Experience. And early on in the book, there was a statement that went something like this: in the spring of 2001, which was the same spring as you remember that you saw the B-2 bomber, probably was the spring of 2001. We don't know for sure. Frank Joseph, the author, said, I was writing about B-17 and B-24 bomber planes of the United States Army Air Force in World War II, the same vintage that you're talking about. He took a break from his work writing about these planes and went outside just as you did, and looked up in the sky and heard the droning of an unusual aircraft engine. And there he looked up was a flying fortress, a B-17 flying at low altitude, just as yours did. And I got chills because we had a similar recollection. I was seeing Frank Joseph's, and you were re-experiencing yours. So what do you think that meant, Eben? What do you think was going on there with you and me?
Well, I like to look at all of this as a kind of a way of looking at the ordering principles in the universe. And the neurosurgeon, materialist scientist in me before coma, didn't pay attention to synchronicities because I thought there's no way they can actually work. They're just unusual quirks of circumstance. But of course, since my coma, I've come to see that I need to pay big attention to that because I have a much grander mindset about space, time, mass, energy, causality, and trying to understand the nature of reality than I ever did before. And I've come to realize that this is very much that we're all dreaming the dream of the one mind. This is all of kind of a shared experience, even though we have this sense of self and this sense of being in a here and a now. But I would say that a lot of that sense of locality and sense of existing as a human self is really kind of an illusion. It's a fiction that's set up to allow this drama to unfold. And the drama unfolds through the interaction of sentient beings trying to make sense of their lives. And that includes especially drivers such as synchronicities. So for me, I see the one mind of the universe trying to help us come to a deeper understanding, knowing that we were going to have this conversation, and therefore putting this out there as a concept to help us all learn in this process.
Very, very good. We're coming to the end of this segment. We are listening to Connecting with Coincidence with your host, Bernie Beitman, MD, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, and our guests are Eben Alexander and Karen Newell.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. CCBB.com.
Welcome back to CC with BB, and our guests are Eben and Karen, and we have gone through a coincidence involving not only Eben and a B-2 bomber, but also a coincidence involving my reading about flying fortresses of the B group. Around the same time that Eben and Karen thought of sending me this coincidence. And we're talking about this as evidence of our interconnectedness, that our minds are really not as separate as we think. And the way I think about these things is that we create tunnels between our minds, that part of the fabric of our universe is that we look like we're all connected, but this is evidence that we are connected. And I like to look at the ways that connection takes place, kind of a tunnel between minds, that emotion drives those connections. Just as I was choking uncontrollably over a sink in San Francisco while my father was dying of choking on his own blood 3,000 miles away. That was a tunnel connecting him with me, me with him. We probably were always connected, but that high emotion made it more obvious. And this is a similar variant on the theme that shows us our interconnection, probably through intense emotion with each other.
Well, I think that's a very good point, is the emotions are really what give us skin in the game. And it's that kind of connection with others, the loving connections, and that have everything to do with a deeper understanding of this one mind and of that entanglement between minds. And I think that this kind of synchronicity, not only my explanation of the synchronicity that occurred for me in spring of 2001, but also its retelling in the now moment, set up with your synchronicity. These things build on each other, and they're just a beautiful example of how, when we open our minds to this much greater degree of connectedness of all these mental experiences, it gives us a much richer view of our role as human beings, and I believe also as to our potential for influence in the evolving reality, by showing this that the universe really is all mental, and that we connect to it as mental beings. But it's not a connection through kind of material realms and the perceived limitations of space and time.
There's two things I heard in what you're saying. One is that we can influence what happens, and that's through our intention and probably our emotions. But also this universal mind is trying to teach us something. And as Karen has mentioned before, that without having our radio show have to be rescheduled twice, we would not have had this coincidence to be talking about in these at this time. The coincidence not only about yours, but the coincidence between us. And there's something about the energy of doing this show that generates sometimes coincidence. And anyway, we have been trying to connect with each other and have not been able to. And here was a way that we were reaching out towards each other that we could identify as something that showed us, at least temporarily, that we were connected. And that evidence for our listeners is evidence that they should be looking for in their own lives.
Right. I think that's a very good point. And in fact, to me, it kind of brings up another thing I've noticed ever since my coma, and that is really there are no accidents. All this stuff happens for a purpose. And so in looking back, even though we were a bit frustrated by the challenges of trying to get this interview with you and had to reschedule it twice, I can't help but think but that the universe and kind of that one mind was setting up for a better and better adventure in the show for your listeners, by allowing us to come up with these other synchronicities and then allowing us to connect them as we've described, in the first part of the show, what's happened over the last 24 hours with our communications. So I always look at it as kind of the one mind trying to help us learn and teach as best we can to better define our relationship with the nature of the universe.
Karen, what are your comments on all this?
Well, I love your term, the tunnel of connection, that temporary tunnel, because we were thinking about you. We were thinking about the show. And I knew from our communication that you enjoyed planning the shows. And so it's no wonder we were all thinking about it the day before. But the fascination of that synchronicity with the bombers is just still kind of leaving me dumbstruck. I like to think that I'm open-minded and accept all of this as real, but then sometimes you're just left with your jaw dropped going, wow, this stuff really does happen on a regular basis,
This stuff really does happen. That's right.
It's the real world.
And something that strikes me, it's so easy when you hear of someone else's coincidence. They go through all the details and they're telling you. It's very easy as the listener, if you're not real open-minded and accepting, it's very easy as the listener to dismiss it as, maybe they thought of it a certain way, or they must have known, or, it couldn't be, and so easy. But when it's your own, when it happens to you, everything changes.
Yeah, it's so true. That's so true. Eben, you've commented about the eternal now, and there's a book, The Power of Now, that's been very popular for a long time. There's Get in the Present, Be Present. I once had an experience of seeing the endless now going off in all directions, just in the moment that I was in infinity and in eternity for a little while. You were there for a longer time. That this now is all there is, and people say that in various ways. And then there's that problem of that we don't register the now for a millisecond because it's got to go through our brain to be able to hit our consciousness or something like the sensations have to do that. But please both of you talk about the endless now, the eternal now.
Well, I would say certainly in looking back on my coma experience, I mentioned how time flow in this realm was very quickly apparent to me as a loop or a point or something very much confined and not the linear kind of river flow that we normally think of as past, present, and future. And as a scientist, I realized that time is one of the deepest mysteries in all of physics. For those people out there who think, oh, well, physics has obviously figured out something as primordial as time, they have not at all. And even more interesting is when you look on a kind of a subatomic at a quantum and atomic level, you find that everything should work forwards and backwards in time equally well. The only thing that even gives an arrow to time is a macro principle, and that is what's known as the second law of thermodynamics, which is a statistical law applied to large numbers of particles. And that's the only way you can even give an arrow to time. All the normal equations of physics, especially at an atomic and subatomic level, work equally well backwards and forwards. So time is a very, very strange entity. Now, another concept here that takes it to an even deeper level is that of John Archibald Wheeler, the renowned Princeton physicist who gave us notions like wormhole and black hole. And towards the end of his life, he realized quantum physics was so bizarre that it suggested either that life was kind of, and consciousness were accidental byproducts or a very deep part of emergent reality. And he knew that quantum physics actually showed the latter to be the case. And his point was that nothing exists even in the distant past, until it's registered in the present moment in the mind of an observer. And I can't go into detail on that because it gets very complicated, but it basically points to the fact that we all live in an eternal now. And the assumptions we make about past and future are very much assumptions and not really deeply proven as much as the eternal now.
And, Eben likes to talk about the science of it all, but I like to point out the personal experience of it all. And this idea of an eternal now, that we're all living it, we don't usually notice that we're in the now because so often we're worried about things that are going to happen in the future or anxiety about something that happened in the past. Very few of us are actively focused on the now, except for when you get potentially a an amazing creative inspiration, or you're very focused on a creative act, something that for Eben, it was being in surgery for so long. Just being in that flow state is certainly a state of being in that eternal presence. Of course, you can touch it in meditation and such, but during our daily lives, it's so wonderful to come across an activity that can keep us feeling that present moment that Eben describes so beautifully.
And how does your heart awareness fit in with being in the now?
Oh, well, the heart is the heart is a beautiful thing. That's one of the things that, of course, when you have a lot of stored emotional traumas, that you can feel like it's causing you trouble, just bad emotions and worries and such. But when you can get past all that and find that still point inside, that spark of being that all of us have from within, that really is made of love at its core, it's inside each and every one of us. And yes, when we can focus in that heart space, that wonderful still moment, we're absolutely connecting to that now moment that really connects us to the source of all that is.
And that now moment, and we're coming to the end of this segment, that now moment, being in that now moment, I think has something to do with creating coincidences or creating synchronicities. Because when you're there, you're more able to tap into the interconnectedness of everything and our place in the now and the places of others who happen to be getting to the now. You are listening to Connecting with Coincidence with your host, Bernie Beitman, MD, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, and our guests are Eben Alexander and Karen Newell.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to CC with BB, Connecting with Coincidence with Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD. That is me. And our guests today are Karen Newell and Eben Alexander, authors of the new book, Living in a Mindful Universe. And we're talking about being in the present, in the here and now. And I had such an experience, very dramatic, one time where I sat in my office and had the experience of endlessness of the present. It was going on and on in all directions with my mind in the middle of it, and there it went on forever and forever. And being in that present, being in that here and now, is a place from which coincidences emerge. Being in the flow emerges. And what Eben and Karen are trying to be able to tell us, that all there is this endless now.
Well, I think that's something that became very clear to me from my coma journey. I saw time, that is our Earth time, as a loop or a point. I mean, all of it collapsed down, and I realized that it's a fiction. In many ways, I could see how the deeper underlying reality did not have a flow of time attached to it. In fact, I could see how that notion of time flow of a present and a past and future, in addition to notions of existence in a spatial location, are in many ways kind of imprinted on this side of the veil. They're part of our consciousness and not part of that underlying reality. So my coma journey showed me that very clearly. And of course, coming back and in the 9 years since then, trying to make sense of it all, I've come to realize that time is one of those things within science that is absolutely not, quote, well understood. It's not really understood at all. In fact, when you look at the subatomic realm or at the atomic realm, where all of chemistry occurs and atoms and subatomic particles, all of that, what you realize is there's nothing in the mathematical equations and everything that govern that domain that allow us to tell which way time should flow. It should go forwards or backwards equally easily. And in fact, what we come to realize is that our bigger notions of time flow in this macro world of human experience is all determined by something called the second law of thermodynamics, which is a statistical principle applied to gigantic numbers of subatomic particles. But in their world, in the world of those particles, atoms, molecules, you don't have the same sense of time flow at all. And I think, to me, this is a very important part of trying to understand all this, is that time flow is not what we think it is.
And many philosophers, as well as people who don't write, talk about the difference between objective time and subjective time. And there are different names given to each one of those, but there is human experience of that difference between what we think of as clock time and something else. And that subjective one is not as mysterious, but still is, because time seems to change in our experience. And so our flow of time in subjective time is something different, where things happen. Time just passes without noticing something. When you're deeply in the flow, when you're deeply in the now, you begin to lose some of that time sense.
Well, that's all very true. I would say we need to have great caution in how we look at that, quote, objective time.
Yes.
And in that sense, what I would bring up are the experiments of Daryl Bem, the psychologist in New York, who did some extraordinary work just a few years ago with a computer model where the computer would show an image that would either be very violent and horrifying, or very soothing and loving, or neutral. And what he discovered is that, to a very high degree of statistical precision, he found that the subjects could actually discern what was going to be the nature of the picture that would show up on the screen before the computer had actually made the random selection. Now, I cannot stress enough how shocking that statement should be to your audience. That those findings of Daryl Bem's have been replicated in numerous laboratories around the world. It's a very real effect. And what it shows us is that our human notion of time is not as rock steady as we like to think, and that we have ways of either knowing or creating the future beyond any kind of statistical probabilities that should call us to greatly kind of question how this higher mind works and the unfolding nature of reality. That's very much different from our conventional materialist view of past, present, future, and organized objective time flow.
Very good, very good, very good. I had a statistician, David Hand, on the program, and he loves to argue about probability and statistics. And I'm trying to figure out how he thinks. And he's got a view that that reality is statistics, because changing the hardened views of people in material science is difficult. Like trying to get people to change their language. They don't want to do it because inertia of the mind, or at least the brain, is making them continue to want to have it. And that's what we're doing with this program. That's what we're doing in many other different ways. Your books, I'm trying to do that. Others are trying to do that. Change the minds. But I think this is going to be one funeral after another. We're going to have to get the younger minds to be able to pay attention as the older minds disappear. But Karen, we were talking here about Daryl Bem and the experiments that people could somehow know the future. And you have a good fish story that I think goes along with that.
Yes, well, we had just finished constructing a koi pond here at our home, and Eben had spent a couple months building it, and then we had gone out and just populated it with 18 fish. And within about a month of those 18 fish being happy-go-lucky in the pond, they started to show up missing, and we had lost 2 fish. We didn't know what happened to them. It was very sad. They were very colorful and very unique looking, each and every one of them. So we had come up with names for them so that we could tell them apart. So I knew the name of every single fish. We were very sad to lose Trixie and Shuby, the 2 we had lost. And so I was very emotional about it. I'm like, we got to protect our fish. We can't just have them be plucked off one after the other. And so one morning I woke up with a dream that yet another fish had gone missing. This one was named Buster. This dream was very vivid. I saw Buster laying on the ground, clear as a bell, and I thought, oh no, he's dead. And so very conscious of these concepts of creating or predicting the future, I put it out of my mind. I didn't want to be any part of a self-fulfilling prophecy of losing yet another fish. And so I just put it out of my mind very quickly that morning. Well, later that day, around 2 o'clock, Eben was out working on the pond. I went out there, and when I walked out onto the deck, I had this sudden, immediate remembrance of the dream. And I said, oh my gosh, I had a dream that Buster was dead. We have to look for him. And so we started looking for Buster, and we couldn't find him. In fact, we never saw him again from that moment forward. And it seems that I don't know if I had a precognitive dream, if I connected with Buster as he was passing, or what happened there. I like to think I didn't play a role in creating that future, but there you have it. The fish was gone, the exact fish. We later learned through doing some video surveillance that it was a blue heron that was taking our fish. Buster was the last one that we lost. You'll all be happy to know we now protect them with a net very successfully. But yes, it was very, like you mentioned earlier, the emotional state. And I was very emotional about losing more fish. And so very interesting that seemed to open up a channel of connection.
Yes, and I referred to emotion as part of what has happened maybe between us, that the emotion of this program and trying to make it happen and trying to make these connections happen. And emotion plays a role in what you were having to have a conflict about. Did you create this problem for Buster getting taken away, or did you anticipate it? And both those words are problematic because they have to do with hidden assumptions about what time is. Because we have the problem of mothers having the awareness in a dream or some other way that their child on the way to school, walking to school, gets hit by a car, but the mother doesn't believe the intuition and the child is hit and dies. What one does with these imaginings of the future, and then they happen, and it's a tragedy. How do you respond to that, Karen?
Well, I can't imagine that mothers are going around. I mean, I'm a mother myself. I'm a new grandmother, actually. I can't imagine that our fears and anxieties about our children actually cause their accidents. This is just something that I can't wrap my head around. But I certainly, knowing of these concepts, it does sometimes make your head spin when you try to explain it all. But I like to think that I was just tapping into Buster's passing, and that it was a clue that he wanted to give me to look for him so that we didn't lose more fish. And, because we might not have noticed he was gone for a few days, and that was really helpful. He potentially helped us save who knows how many fish.
Yeah, sacrificed himself by marking his connection to you. And the way you're talking is consonant with fits with the way I think about these temporary tunnels between us and other living creatures. And the tunnels may be there, as Eben has said, but they becoming aware of them is what coincidences help us do. They help say, look, there's something dramatic happening here. How do we understand it? Tunneling between consciousness, between hearts and minds, have something to do with it. You are listening to Connecting with Coincidence. I'm your host, Bernie Beitman, MD, on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Our guests are Eben Alexander and Karen Newell.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to CC with BB. Our guests are Karen Newell and Eben Alexander, authors of Living in a Mindful Universe. And we've gone from airplanes to fish and talking about coincidences, all of which have indicated what I think Karen and Eben are trying to say in various ways, is that we're all connected. And these stories, these coincidences, these synchronicities show us in direct experience, which is what we need. It's one thing to say, well, that's interesting, but in direct experience, showing us that we can not only be connected with each other human beings, but connected with fish that we care about. And I particularly have some good relationships with trees, particularly over in Mint Springs, and a Philippine tree in the botanical gardens in Washington, D.C., and I had a great connection. And we can, if we're aware of it and allow it to happen, experience our connection with all sentient beings, and even ones that we don't call sentient. So how do coincidences, synchronicity, show us, to you, Karen, and to you, Eben, that we are all connected?
Well, I think this would be a good time to share another coincidence that happened, because Eben and I spent many, many weeks and months writing our book together, Living in a Mindful Universe. And sometimes when we were writing it, we, a lot of, I would say, close relationed people end up, finishing each other's sentences, knowing what they're going to say before the person says it. And this happened a lot while we were writing the book. And it was interesting and it made sense. But one particular thing happened that kind of blew my mind. And it was sort of the later stage of writing. And we were really just going through and fine-tuning all of the different areas. And at this point, I had the book pretty much memorized in my head, and I knew where the problem areas were. And there was this one particular sentence that was just bothering me, that it was just a little awkward, and it kept running through my mind, and it had been for a couple weeks, I would say, and I just didn't know how to rewrite that sentence. I would move on to something else. But I was sitting out on the porch, kind of watching our dogs run around, and that sentence popped into my head, and I had this realization, I just have to flip it like this, and it will be so much better. Us authors, we obsess over these things. And I thought, I just have to switch that one thing and reword it like this. And so I came into the house to pull it up on my computer to make that change. And I looked, and Eben, of course, we were both working on the same manuscript, so we had to communicate of who was in which chapters. And I saw he was looking through the book at that moment. And I looked at the screen to see where he was. And he was on the exact paragraph that I had been thinking of out on the deck. This to me was just amazing. And Eben just kind of matter-of-factly goes, well, of course you were. Tell me what change you'd like to make. And he typed it into the computer. And, when one of us gets blown away, the other one just says, well, yes, of course that's how it should be. And so we have a nice interplay.
Does Eben get blown away by anything? What does he get blown away by?
Oh, I would say that to me, I was blown away. As much as Karen makes it sound like I just took it in stride, but the bottom line is it really was kind of shocking, because there were hundreds of kind of loose ends in that book at that time, and we were all just kind of working our way through trying to cover them all. And the very fact that one that had bothered Karen for several weeks just happened to be the one that I was in the process of fixing in that moment, it didn't surprise me that she came running in off the porch to say, oh, we've got to do this. And I'm like, I'm doing it right now. So boom. But it was kind of a shocking, synchronicity. It really just showed to me the one mind and the kind of how we're really doing this together. And it's best looked at as kind of the one mind dreaming its dream and progressing.
Yeah, I like to think of that one as because our minds were so close. And, when we present together, we try to do it in a real kind of fluid fashion, even though we come from two completely different directions. Somehow we make it work and tie it all together. And so our mind really has to be in sync. And so I like to think that somehow I was tapped in and saw through his eyes, potentially, not literally, but felt through his eyes what he was looking at. And the solution just came to me. And I like to think that's how we work together. Our minds are actually connected.
Yeah, and I think the connection is variably intense, because sometimes you're off in your own minds, and you have to be in order to be in a relationship. You got to be on your own too, and then you can connect. And couples recognize that in more behavioral terms, but this is much more in mental terms. And even though it might not be a metaphor that fits well with you, but I think it might, is this: the tunnel gets like opened up. It's like it's there, it's always there, but then through emotion somehow opens it up and makes stuff flow between the two minds. I've got a story in my book of two people uncertain about whether to be get married or not, or get engaged or not, and they're 2,000 miles apart, and they're reading, and one of them is reading Khalil Gibran, and calls the other one and says hi, and they both end up that they're reading the same page in the same book.
Right. Karen and I have had similar experiences. So, I completely buy into that. And it's so important for people not to dismiss it and say, oh, I guess crazy things can happen, just a coincidence, because these are very important messages to us about what we're here to learn and teach and know and understand. So I think it's very crucial to keep an open mind about this and playfulness of the universe. It's all about a deeper understanding. And I also find it's important to trust. I find I can trust the universe will give me the kind of information I need. And I take full advantage of that in meditation. I try to meditate an hour to a day. That's something else that Karen and I have done together as a couple that I think that also serves to greatly broaden and strengthen that bridge of connection, those tunnels that you're talking about.
Agreed.
Another thing I want to share is, when Eben and I first met, this was about 3 years after his coma in November of 2011. We both pretty much lived our lives with other people in relationships. And of course, when we met, we had a strong connection, like sometimes people do, and moved on to form our own relationship. But when we started comparing notes about our past, we started noticing that certain things had happened in each of our lives around the same time, but from the opposite perspective. So, for example, when Eben was struggling with alcohol in his life and realizing that it was something he probably needed to eliminate from his life, I was married to an alcoholic and who was struggling with the same thing. And so we found so many strange little parallels. And what we find in our current relationship is that we don't really have a lot of stuff between us. It just seems to be a relationship of mission and connection. And so I feel as though we've kind of worked out all of our issues with other people from those opposite perspectives. It's just amazing the more little parallels we find. Another thing we found is that our parents have birthdays very close to each other. So my mother's birthday is just one day off from his birth mother's birthday, not his adopted mother, but his biological mother. And his father, again, is just one day off from my father's birthday. Very strange. We haven't figured out the answers to all of this, but we're very interested in continuing to explore.
I think that's so intriguing and interesting that your statement that you worked out your problems in other relationships, and now you're clean and ready to go for mission and commitment with the two together. That is beautiful. That's a model that I'd like to have other people get to earlier in their lives, if that's possible, so they can. And that's really what I have in mind, is to help people clear it up earlier, rather than have to wait until later in life, so that relationships, as you described, become more potentially available. But we have a couple of minutes left, and there's one question that I want to get to from both of you. Is there's so much positive that we can talk about, but why do we have hardships? Why is there so much suffering in our world? Why would God create a world of conflict and discord?
Well, I was just going to make that point on the tail of what you were saying a minute ago, that the hardships are blessings. Karen and I only came to realize, you might look at her marriage to an alcoholic husband, and the fact that I was struggling and finally let go of alcohol back in 1991. You can look at those as hardships and difficulties, challenges. I look back on them as beautiful stepping stones, as engines of growth. And this is something that I would say was a big lesson of my NDE, was realizing that all the things that we look at as challenges in our lives, certainly illness and injury, in many ways we should look at as our friends, because it's how we deal with those hardships that energizes and defines a pathway of ascendance towards being a stronger, more connected soul, more knowing of our purpose for existence, and all of that. So very important to look at those hardships as gifts.
Yes, definitely. If I hadn't been married to that alcoholic and understood that issue from the outside perspective, I wouldn't have had the same understanding as I have with Eben. And so these gifts, always, these hardships are opportunities to have some kind of spiritual growth. And of course, as you were saying, it'd be nice if we could figure it out a little quicker. Sometimes we tend to wallow in those hardships, and taking a bigger picture of why that might be happening can be so useful.
Oh, yeah. And as a psychotherapist, one of the things I need to do, try to do, and have to do, and really love to do, is to take the difficulty and turn it into something positive. Right. You've been listening to Connecting with Coincidence with your host, Bernie Beitman, an MD on the X Zone Broadcast Network. And our guests have been Karen and Eben. Thank you so very much for being on the show with me.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.